Welcome to our in-person and virtual audiences this evening. I'm Amy McDonald, Director of CitySpace, and I want to thank our sponsor for tonight's program, Cambridge Trust. I also want to give a shout out to Chloe Axelson, our Cognoscenti editor and mother of three, who pitched Jessica's book to me, and as you can tell by the crowd this evening, her instincts were on point. Jessica Grose is a New York Times opinion writer where she writes a newsletter on parenting, which led to her latest book, Screaming on the Inside, The Unsustainability of American Motherhood. To quote from the New York Times review, her book is equal parts memoir, journalism, cultural criticism, and manifesto, and it would make an excellent holiday gift for a loved one who is considering having a child and really shouldn't. The loved one may still take the leap, but they'll be doing so with open eyes. Our wonderful independent bookstore, Brookline Booksmith, is selling the book, Holiday, in our lobby, and Jess will be signing copies after the program. Jess has also written 2 novels, Sad Desk Salad and Soulmates, which I've heard are hilarious reads. So perhaps we should also buy her novels to make us laugh after reading Screaming on the Inside. Our moderator tonight, I'm just looking, I count 2 men, 3 men, 4 men. Welcome, mothers. Welcome, ladies. We could not be better served than having Emily Oster moderate tonight's conversation, a professor of economics at Brown University and the author of Expecting Better, Cribsheet, and The Family Firm. She has a wildly popular newsletter, Parent Data, that aims to make sense of the latest data about pregnancy and parenting. For parents out there who haven't signed up, go to parentdata.org. We will be taking your questions, and I know this audience is going to have plenty throughout the hour. Just go to slido.com and type in #Grose. Please welcome Emily and Jess.
All right, we're excited. Thank you guys for coming. As Amy said, please do enter questions. I have this little iPad here so I can read them. So I'm not watching White Lotus on here. I'm listening to your questions. Okay, so I am so excited to be here to talk about Jess's new book, Screaming on the Inside, which is absolutely fantastic. And I want to start by asking, if you had to tell one story that you think encapsulates this book, what is it?
I think it would be just an experience that I had in the middle of the pandemic, which was the summer of 2020. Not a great time for most people. I was listening to a conference call on my headphones while changing the laundry from the washer to the dryer. It was around noon, so I could hear my children whining in the background because they were hungry. And it just felt like an encapsulation of everything that had happened and that I was being pulled in every possible direction in the same minute. And so obviously the pandemic was the typical parenting experience on steroids, but I felt like nothing I had read really expressed that feeling of being pulled in so many directions and sort of failing at each task that was possible. So I was only half listening to the work call,
right,
and the laundry was being shoved in a very aggressive manner.
You weren't separating the whites and the darks.
Right, was not separating. The children were hungry. They were not being fed, or they were being half watched at best. So I felt like that the pandemic, I think, did that for a lot of people, where it was things were manageable beforehand for a lot of people, but not ideal, and often felt like it wasn't working in the way that you would want it to. And it just really crystallized in that moment, and that was around when I started writing the proposal for the book, and sort of flowed from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing for me that resonates a lot with this is just this feeling of you're not doing anything at 100%. That like somehow it's very, which is encapsulated in the story, that it's like very difficult to feel like you're kind of crushing it at the conference call and also the lunch. And even like, I just want to say, like, I'm doing this interview and I feel I'm doing like so far a pretty good job. But on my phone, my 7-year-old is texting me that his sister has a temperature of 99.9, and then there's a lot of crying emojis. And so it's sort of like, it's a moment. Okay. All right. So why is it American motherhood, though?
So I think the American context is so particular, especially among our peer nations. So any country that is as wealthy as ours gives more to parents and to children. We are one of the few nations that doesn't have paid sick leave, does not have universal health care, does not have any child care support, just kind of any of the social safety net things that allow, it doesn't make parenting easy, but it certainly makes it function in a much more seamless way. I mean, just the way that we approach child care is bananas, and it makes everyone feel.
Say more.
If you are a family that either has a single parent or both parents working, there is this sort of feeling that you're having to navigate the system by yourself, and you're the first person who's ever done it, and that's because there's no one to help you, and that there's no sort of system surrounding it. I mean, not even federal or local systems, but even, I mean, now there's 100,000 fewer childcare workers than pre-pandemic, but there just isn't enough supply to meet the demand.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just the sheer energy it takes to navigate that, many books have been written just about that. So I think, obviously, the American context is the one that I know the best, but I think that there are unique features to it that make it more difficult for the average person to be a parent.
So I want to dig into this because I think this piece about the childcare strikes me as quite important. So even sort of putting aside the pandemic, when of course the childcare was complicated for a bunch of other reasons, the kind of inability of people to access childcare in America seems quite unusual. And I think people find themselves in this sort of, like, you could have a nanny, but that is incredibly expensive. Or you could send your child to daycare, also very expensive, but not really, like, difficult to even find. What is it about the system here that makes that true?
Oh, I mean, there really isn't a system. Okay. So, I mean, the way that childcare is expensive, full stop. It should be expensive. You do not want the budget version of taking care of your infant. Like, I don't think anyone feels cool about that. Like, it should be high quality. And so the people who are doing it should be skilled, and they should be paid a good wage. That costs a lot of money. There's also insurance, there's space. Like, it is never going to be something that is inexpensive. And it is not inexpensive in these other countries, but what it is subsidized by their governments. And so, and it is part of a system. And so it's different, it's slightly different in every country, but it works not completely unlike the way the education system works. It's not, your taxes pay for the public education system, and you send your child. You're not individually having to be like, oh, my kid is going to second grade. I guess I have to figure out how that works. Like, that's not how we do it. And so in other countries, it just extends down to, 1 year old. I mean, the other part of it is in most of
it's 1 year old. It's not 6 weeks old.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the other part of it, is that there's paid parental leave. And in many places, our lovely neighbors to the north, Canada, for one, it's a full year that the birth mother will get off from her job and be allowed to go back to it. So, it's just a much more difficult, individualized, and individualistic context. And parents are paying more out of their pocket. And that's just how it works, unfortunately.
So I want to do a few different conversations about solutions. But if we sort of think about this solution as like particular thing, is it just subsidies? So is it just that people need to be paid more, and the way the market works is if we could pay people more, then we could have more of them?
Well, no, I mean, we're seeing this in New York. New York City is sort of a microcosm, right? And they're not doing something with daycare, but they're extending the school system downward. So they're trying to do universal 3K. First they did universal pre-K, and then they did universal 3K. And I may get some of these details incorrect because I don't have the articles in front of me, but I'm trying to be as accurate as possible. it takes a while to roll out. You have to find the spaces to have and not just the providers, you have to find the real estate. It doesn't work particularly well. The supply and demand is going to take a while to get the fit right. So there's like all of these parts of it. And again, it has to be, that's just adding to an existing system. You would actually have to create the system because the way it's paid for now is block grants. And that is depending on the state you live in. That's not.
Tell people what block grant. Like,
The federal government gives a block of money to a state, and the state has to figure out how it is going to, there are strings attached, and it's not like, oh, we gave you this money for childcare, why don't you use it on ponies? Like, you can't just do that. Like, there's specific things that you have to use it for. But because of our particular form of government, each state doesn't use it in the exact same way. And so that's also complicated. There's, depending on the country, more of a federal system, but I mean, it depends, Canada, each province kind of does its own thing. So that was a long-winded and complicated answer because it's a complicated problem.
It's an extremely complicated problem.
But basically, I mean, to make it like other countries, we would have to either make it part of the school systems that already exist or create a new system from the ground up, which doesn't really exist. And now it's all just, except for Head Start, which serves only the poorest Americans, and it does not serve all of them. I think it's something like a seventh or an eighth of eligible children are served by Head Start. So there are many eligible children who are not getting to use that program. But, you can make universal Head Start. I don't know. I don't make policy.
No, we don't make policy.
Yeah,
but I mean,
we just complain about it.
We just complain. It's so easy. It's so easy to complain. No, and I mean, I think the point about sort of like the age groups, I think, is very meaningful, because the difference between the sort of kind of care that you need for a 6-week-old and the kind of care you need for a 2-year-old is very different, and it's much easier to imagine expanding the school system down to serve 2-year-olds than it is to imagine expanding it down to serve 2-month-olds.
Right.
And it's just like a totally different set of skills.
Right. And I think, when you talk about the policies, the one that is the most popular and I think has the most chance of being enacted at the federal level is paid leave for new parents. And it's because it's just obvious. And you ask any person on the street, regardless of their political affiliation, do you think it's a good idea to send a person who gave birth 4 weeks ago back to a job? Most of them are going to be like, that sounds like a terrible idea. Right. And so it's logical. And so I'm, as much as I am somewhat pessimistic about sort of other safety net programs happening, I'm optimistic that we will get there for paid family leave.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think part of what's my sense of the politics here is because it is so popular, it's something you want to like stick into every bill, to like make that bill more. So you have like a crummy bill, you're like, put this in. Everybody likes this, and then it doesn't get through.
I mean, we don't have enough time to talk about the sausage making process in the federal government and how it is not working great. But I think if we could have a standalone bill that was just paid leave,
we would get it through.
I think so.
I think that's right.
I mean, again, I'm not a betting woman, so wouldn't bet it.
That seems right to me. All right, reminder: you guys can enter questions here. I don't actually. Somebody in my ear tell me how they do that to remind them. No, okay. Oh, it's up here. It's like behind me. Yeah. First you read up here, and then you can enter your questions. Thank you. Okay, so we talked about the American piece. I want to talk about the motherhood piece. Yeah. So why is this not? I mean, there are some men here. We said what are we, the 4? But this I think this is a unique. The sort of policy problem is a problem for families, but this problem that you described at the beginning about like the laundry is happening at the same time and the kids are yelling, like that is a problem that seems to be at least more frequently experienced by mothers. Right. And I wonder, I mean, is that like inevitable?
Kind of. I will say, like, I could give you the whole like historical spiel, which I will spare you, but I think the patterns get ingrained really early. And so there's tons of research that show, because especially if you're in a couple that is a biological mother who has given birth and a father, so like a heteronormative situation, starting from day one, if the mother is breastfeeding, if she is the one changing the diapers, like those patterns of baby care just get so ingrained. And so I actually, and you can steal this line if you don't have kids yet and you plan to have one, anytime my husband would turn to me and be like, I don't know how to do this. What does she want? And I would be like, I don't know. I don't speak baby. Like, I'm new to this too. You have to figure it out along with me. And I think there is a sense where often in heterosexual couples, men are not doing the hands-on work from day one. And it actually really matters. I mean, of course, you can reverse course and, make it more even. But I don't think it's inevitable, but I think that there's a lot of both internal and external pressures that make it the path of least resistance to have the mother be the main parent.
Yeah, so there's this idea in economics of sort of like learning by doing and specialization that, it's sort of more efficient if people specialize. And there's also like very strong, like as you do something more, you get better at it. And so if I'm doing more of this just like sort of in the first 2 weeks and then I become really good at it, then it's actually like kind of frustrating to go backwards. And it's much faster for me to do it and then for me to keep doing it. And then you never learn to do it.
I mean,
you know how to do it.
In the book, I talked to parents who are, trying to push back against these norms, whether they were couples that were not heterosexual, so as two women, because it was a focus on motherhood. I didn't talk to two male couples, or, I didn't end up talking to any non-binary parents. But there's, even if you are in those couples and you have to kind of educate the world around you. So if you're in a heterosexual couple and you're trying to say like, oh, actually the dad is the lead parent or he's going to do this. There was a mom I talked to who really was 50-50 with her husband and was trying to get the pediatrician's office to call the dad. It was like, no, he is managing this. And the receptionist was like, well, don't you know his schedule? And she was like, no, I don't. Like, just call him. You have his number. We told you to call him. And so she just described like having to train the world around them to treat her husband as an equal partner. So even if you are in your own house trying to have, things be as equal as possible, it's the path of least resistance to not. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think it
Yes.
does make sense. Yes. No, I think it does make sense. And it's a, like the policy problem, I think a complicated one to think about fixing because like many of these problems, like in every moment, it would be easier not to fix it.
Right.
And it is like something where consciously you have to be like, no, no, you're going to change the diaper. And then it's like takes a really long time. But it's like sleep training or something, right? Like the first night's really bad. And then they like get better. The diaper changing. So we should think about like sleep. It's like training.
Right.
Diaper training. Yeah.
And there was actually a really great book called Spouseonomics that was written about, I think, 10 years ago.
Is it by an economist?
It was by finance writers.
Okay.
Wall Street. One of them, they either both worked at the Wall Street Journal or one did. One is now my colleague at the Times who works in audio. And it was all about specialization and like how to specialize and be most efficient in your tasks. And I think we do that to some extent.
Definitely.
But it's hard to not always get the short end of the stick in that.
Yeah. And I think there is often like a balance between efficiency and equity in this, it's sort of in this space that like, so when I was a kid, my parents, my mother insisted that my parents each cook every other night because like it was very important to her that things be equal. But like my father was a really bad cook, and so like he only knew how to make like 4 things, and so it was quite bad in terms of efficiency because if we never got better, there was no learning by doing to do the same 4 things every time. But it was very equal.
Right.
Very equal.
Well, that's the thing too. I think sometimes the conversation gets into sort of like this rhetorical cul-de-sac because I don't know that even having everything be 50-50 is necessarily the goal. I think it's a sense, every couple is its own sort of system, and I think it's having more of a sense of fairness, and that, I think that the mother is not just the default. And I think that takes work, but I think that is a more realistic goal than necessarily having everything be 50-50 or even not having the mother probably doing like slightly more, especially in the near term. I think part of what I tried to do with the book is show, even if things seem sort of backlogged and like things aren't moving fast enough in the direction that some people would want it to go in, we have made a huge change in the past 50 years. I think all the time about how when my parents got married in 1972, my mother would not have been able to access her own credit. She wouldn't have been able to buy a house by herself. Like those sorts of things that I think we take for granted in our day-to-day. And just, when I was sort of griping to this amazing historian, Alice Kessler Harris, about how things seem like they're not moving forward, she was just like, when I started working, I was a teacher in the Baltimore public schools, and I literally had to sign a contract that said if I became pregnant, I would quit the job. Like that was a thing that regularly happened in the 60s because it was before the Pregnancy Discrimination Act happened. So anytime I get sort of hopeless or despairing, I think about those sorts of things. And so even as, we're sitting up here talking about how far we have to go, we have come a very long way in a very short amount of time. And so taking that sort of historical long view, I find to be really helpful and heartening.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so we have a question, which is about childcare, but I think it's a very good question. With childcare so expensive, who is getting rich from it? Is there anyone who is getting rich from childcare? $2,500 a child a month seems like a lot, and so someone presumably is getting rich.
No, unfortunately, landlords maybe. If you talk to people who run daycares, they are not getting rich from it at all, and certainly the workers are not getting rich from it. Insurance and real estate are kind of the biggest outlays, but also you have to maintain a high level of clients, right? And so that like the supply demand fit for daycares is very, very hard to keep up unless you live in a major city. And so this is actually a huge problem in rural America because there's basically not enough they can't hire workers because there's not enough children, but then there's more children who need, like the matching. You're an economist. What do you call that? Is that like product market fit? I don't know those words.
Yeah, equilibrium.
Yeah,
equilibrium.
It's equal. You can't get the equilibrium. So no, absolutely no one, unfortunately, is getting rich from this, again, except for big city landlords probably.
Yeah, or maybe, I don't know. That's probably a longer conversation about how the market works.
Right. But I mean, it's all these things cost a lot of money. And especially with infants, you need a really high caregiver to baby ratio. And that is very expensive to maintain.
Right. True. Okay, so this audience member says that what I'm taking from this is that I probably shouldn't have kids because it is unsustainable. And I can't do it well while doing my job well. Yes or no?
No, that's false. Okay, so I actually...
That's not the central message today.
I've actually been thinking about writing a column about this because I don't only want to talk about the bad things about having kids. And it's not even a bad thing. It's just like we make it harder than it has to be. Like it is also the best thing I've ever done. Every day, my children make me laugh and smile, and I am delighted to watch them grow as human beings. So you should definitely not have kids if you don't want kids. But if you want kids, like totally have them. A+ experience, would recommend it to anyone who wanted to do it. I would say, I think go into it knowing that work is going to get harder. It's going to be harder. You might have to work less. You might have to take a different kind of job for a while. But also that even though the period of having young children seems like you'll never exit that period sometimes. My kids are 6 and my older daughter just turned 10. Totally easy. They can feed themselves. They can wipe their own butts. Like, honestly, they're so fun to hang out with. Like it's hard to see when you have a baby. Like I think all the time about the summer that my older daughter was 4 and my younger daughter was 1, and we were at the pediatrician every week for 6 weeks. And the younger one just woke up at between 4:30 and 5:30 every day. And I have never been so tired in my entire life. And I just was like, I can't, how am I going to get through this? And I did.
You did
It was awful, but like, it didn't make me be like, I shouldn't have had these kids because I'm so tired. It made me be like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Please stop waking up at 4:30. And the worst part was she was in a great mood. Like she would just be like, I'm
like,
here.
they wanna
what's
hang
up?
out.
Like, I
They
just
wanna
want to
hang
hang out. And I'm just like, why? So early. But now if she wakes up, she still wakes up early, but she can just go downstairs and make herself a snack. It's amazing.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I also don't think that you should not have children. I love having kids. I think that people, there's a sense that expectations matter quite a lot, and so a lot of times we sort of come into parenting thinking like, okay, I'm going to be able to do like parenting at 1,000,000,000% and also like my job at 1,000,000,000%. And something I have found very liberating is like realizing the things that you can't do. And you know, when kids are little, like you can't do anything, but like even at the older ages, like I have to realize like I'm signing up for the paper goods, you know, like when your kid comes home and they're like, you know, Madeline's mom made 2 kinds of pumpkin bread, the kind with salt and without salt. And like, I tried both of them, and you have to be like, yeah, we bought a fruit bowl from Whole Foods. It cost $37. So that's what I contributed, you know, and I think just recognizing. Yes. And what I will say is that was something my parents did. My mother did too. So my mother also worked. She had like basically the same job that I have. And she was very insistent. Like, number 1, like try to get the sheet first. Number 1 is paper plates. Number 2 is cups. If you can't do those, it's brownie mix. And other than that, just like don't sign up.
Yeah.
Like you can't have anything else. And I feel like, then I was like, you're also like a really good parent. And I realized you can be a good parent if you buy the fruit bowl.
I mean, I think the thing is too, and like what I have tried to do especially, I mean, through my writing, but also in my workplace is employers need to treat their employees like they have lives, like they have personal lives, and there needs to be more space for that. And I do think that is getting better in terms of radical flexibility, in terms of just, you know, being able to be honest that you have children. I mean, you talk to my mom, also worked, and it was not usual to be a doctor when she became a doctor. And she just never talked about her kids, had to, you know, it just was not normalized. You didn't talk about kids in the 80s, was not how it is. And I think that has radically changed at work. But I think our employers, and not just for parents, every person will probably have to do some form of caretaking in their lives, whether it is for older family members, whether it's for siblings, for friends, and we need to make space for that. And I think it's just such a misnomer that people are less dedicated employees if you give them flexibility. I actually think they are more dedicated because they are not burnt out, and they feel like they can fit it all in. Because I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic, which obviously was horrible, was showing a lot of employers that like, wow, people are incredibly productive working from home. Like all of the stats on productivity showed that there was not a loss of productivity. Obviously not all jobs can be done from home, but I just think they're set in an old-fashioned mindset. They are scared to be flexible, and I think we need to force them to be flexible. And so reframing it as not like, oh, it's my personal failure that I'm not working exactly like I did when I didn't have children. I think we need to put it back on our employers to be like, why do you expect everyone to work as if they have no life outside of a job? Like, that's not humane and sustainable for any person.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think this sort of relates to this question here, though, which is like generally in some, not all, but some jobs, there is this sense that like, you know, you kind of step off the ladder and leave is missed time, and it's hard to come back. And yes, like we can give you flexibility, but like wink, wink, nod, nod. Like we all know like that's the mommy track.
Right.
And I wonder if you think that there are that there are more systemic solutions to that problem?
I think I can only tell you how I've solved it in my life, which is a realization that like I don't want that. There are going to be certain jobs, especially if you want to be like top boss, you are going to have to put in all of the hours. And if that's what you want, that's great. You should do that. And hopefully you will be remunerated enough that you can pay for, the childcare, or you have a spouse that doesn't want to.
Pay for the spouse.
Or have a spouse that doesn't want that. I realized when I had kids that I really didn't want to be on that track, because I've been in management, and I realized like I prioritize flexibility. Certainly, money matters. And so I would, that's why I'm on staff somewhere and not freelance, even though like if I had to choose, hopefully my employer is not listening to this, if like all things were being equal and I could make the same money, I would definitely be freelance. But at some point you have to make a decision about how you want to spend your time. And I think recognizing that that's an active decision, it's not something that's being done to you. It's saying like, there's only so many hours in the day. How do I want to spend those hours? And thinking about it more that way, and saying like, there are jobs, and the economist Claudia Golden uses this term, the greedy jobs. Greedy jobs. They will take up all your time. And the highest profile and best paid jobs tend to be really greedy jobs. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a mother or being a parent and wanting a greedy job. Go for that greedy job. But I don't know that those jobs are ever going to be reasonable about the hours that they ask from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what's frustrating about the efficiency of those jobs is that like the time period in which you are parenting and you would in which anyone would like to parent in this like intensive way is relatively short.
Yes.
And so it feels like, people are being lost to those jobs who might actually be very good at them, because there's this sort of like up or out. I mean, this in academia, there's this idea like your sort of tenure track. The period in which you're trying to get tenure is like the same as for many people as the period you would have kids. And so it's sort of like a little bit, the timing is not so good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is one obvious fix is allowing people these sort of longer runways, and not, I think academia is a very specific context, but most jobs you can stay at one level, and that doesn't mean you have to stay at that level forever. But I think most industries are so specific in terms of, I mean, mine is, I think, more flexible than most, just because it's just a sort of skill, a set of skills that you can deploy in kind of whatever way.
Yeah, so somebody asked here, and I'm going to alter this question slightly because I think it's closely related to what we're talking about. So people do get to the top, right? People get to the top of these jobs, and sometimes they're moms. And I think this question says, people in that position often shy from using their kids as an excuse and basically hide their momming. And we've both talked about this idea of sort of having those things be more visible at the top. But how do we institute that kind of change? Do we think that would help? If like all the
it absolutely
boss professional moms were like,
yes, I think that would help tremendously, because people take cues from the top. And you see this actually a lot in the paternity leave literature, because on the books there will be a paternity leave policy like, oh, you can have 3 months paid, and they find out that nobody takes it because they know that they will be penalized, and because they see that the upper executives take a week, and so they're like, well, he's going to look down on me if I'm taking the full 3 months. And so I think it's actually incredibly important for leaders at the top to lead by example, because even if there isn't an explicit statement that you will sort of be punished or seen differently if you take the full amount on the books, people observe and act accordingly. So I actually think that is incredibly important to set an example.
But like, how do we make people do that?
I mean, we can't make them.
Yeah.
They have to choose it.
Yeah, we need more people to move.
And I mean, I actually really do think that's just going to take time. I do think that we will see more and more of it. I think, people, I see sort of in previous generations, there was more of an idea that you could not integrate successfully. And I do think that that's a role. We talk a lot about the negative aspects of technology. I think that that's like a positive aspect of technology because you can do more work from home. You can answer an email at watching your kid's soccer game. Like it allows for a bit more flexibility in terms of where you are in space. It is bad because it is breaking our brains and diverting our attention constantly, but it does allow for a bit more, able to be two places at once.
Yeah, it's good to be able to answer emails at soccer, but not to watch TikTok because that ruins you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's what I'm getting from that. Yeah. All right. I had another question, but then okay. So I'm going to ask this person's question, which is, can we have it all?
I hate that question. I hate it all. Like, what does that even mean? Like,
it says, there's a follow-up, which is work-life balance.
Work-life balance. Yes, totally. I think we can. It takes the problem is it's elusive because you can have it and then it's like, uh-oh, my aftercare program decided that it doesn't exist anymore. And so then it's like, it feels very fragile, but I think it is achievable. It takes a lot of work to get there.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, there's this word of balance. Do you ever feel like you're balance? Balance?
I mean, I mostly just feel tired. Like that's like the primary emotion of most time.
Yeah, I mostly feel. Yeah, but I also think this idea of balance, where you sort of feel like you're. No day is balanced. I feel like in general, you could ask the question, am I sort of happy with the way that the kind of allocation of time between these different activities? But balance implies to me something like every day I feel like I'm getting exactly the right, or I sort of everything is kind of exactly even, whereas, it's mostly just a...
I think also it's our appetite for work and home. It's constantly changing. I mean, one thing that I talk about all the time, which was a statistic that blew my mind, and this was more 10 years ago when I think the idea of the mommy wars was a bigger deal and people used to talk about it all the time. It's like stay-at-home moms and working moms are at war, and I'm always like, that seems not true. But I also realized that actually stay-at-home moms and working moms are often the same mom because it's not like you leave the workforce when you have kids because you want to spend time with them when they're little, and then that means you are a different variety of person and you can never have a paid job again. It doesn't work like that. Most people who become stay-at-home parents for a period of time will often go back to paid work at some point. They might not, but the majority of them, just statistically speaking, do. So I think there's a different appetite depending on who you are and sort of what your goals are. I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that there's sort of a different appetite for work at different points in your life. And it is so definitive. It is so dependent on your sort of circumstances and your, family needs. I've interviewed so many parents who are in the sandwich generation. So that means that they're caring for young children, but they're also often caring for older family members. And there'll just be points where it's there's just too much caretaking that needs to get done and they really want to do it. And so they will leave work for a while. And it has nothing to do with their desire or appetite for work. It just means the circumstances just, I can't right now. And the same goes for, I've interviewed so many parents whose children have a variety of special needs. There's times that they just really need to be there for their kid. And that's, again, it is just the facts of the matter. It has nothing to do with their ability as a worker or their desire to work. It's just that's your life. That's really at the end of the day what is most important. And so I just think that there's it's just we're not in a fixed state is a long-winded way of saying what I just said. We're not.
The balance is a life, you could be balanced over the course of a 30-year span.
Yes.
But not balanced every single day. And that
right,
would be,
but your appetite for the different aspects of your life is going to change, and the details are going to change constantly.
Okay, so in the book, what is your favorite thing you learned? Chapter, We always learn things when we write books.
Okay, so from the historical part, it's the idea of maternal impressions, which is they did not know how babies were made until very recently, like way more recently than you would ever imagine. So for like 1,000 years, they thought that if when you were pregnant and you looked at something, it could imprint on the baby. So if you looked at a frog, your baby could look like a frog. Or if you looked at a man too suggestively, your baby could look like him. And the best was this British grifter, convinced a lot of people that she gave birth to a litter of bunnies. And that was in the 18th century. Her name was Mary Toft. She has a Wikipedia page. But I just thought that was,
Because she looked at a bunny.
Yeah. I mean, it's so amazing that there is all of this information that you wisely debunk when it was like we didn't even know where babies came from like 100 years ago. So that was really interesting. Of the modern reporting that I did, the thing that I just think about all the time is the number. So I think only one of them ended up in the book, but I talked to more than one person who fully hid a pregnancy during the pandemic. They just never told their employers. And the woman who ended up in the book was just like, it was a contract job. So she never saw her employers in real life. She fully had a secret baby. She never told them she was pregnant. She never told them she had the baby. And it was just like, and then it just got weird. Like, I was just hiding this secret baby. And I just felt like, first of all, it was just sort of a funny story, but also just like such an indictment on the way that the American workplace treats, pregnant people and people who just had babies, that they just like, I just would frankly prefer not to tell you that any of this happened, because I'm afraid you would take this project away from me or you would treat me differently. And so I think about that a lot.
Wow. Did she? Yeah.
Just secret baby. Just have a secret baby.
Secret baby. That's amazing. Okay. Follow-on questions. Somebody has. Did you have a goal with the book, and what was it? And if not, what would you like people to get from the book?
Did I have a goal? I think the goal was to say, the primary emotion that I hear most often in my reporting is guilt. It's like, I'm not doing X, Y, and Z, and I should be doing X, Y, and Z. And so through this reporting, what I wanted to say was like, it's not all on you. As an individual parent, you do not have to do all of the things. We are asking too much of you. And there's all of these historical reasons why we're asking too much of you, and you should recognize them before you start feeling bad about yourself. So that was sort of like the primary goal. And what the takeaway that I would really love is to and this is what I've tried to do for myself. So it's not like I've done all this reporting and now I'm fully actualized and I never feel bad about anything. It's like, no, I feel bad about things constantly, all the time. I feel bad that I'm here right now. Of course, this week my husband had to be in LA, so my parents are with my kids, and I'm just like, I should be there. Like, it's you know what, but that's fine. I'm here with you. So anytime, what I have been able to do and what I hope people are able to do is anytime they feel bad about something, feel the feeling, you can't avoid it. But then ask yourself, like, do I actually really care about this? Or is this somebody else's values? Is it someone said something to me that made me feel bad? But it's not even something I care about, like the pumpkin bread. Like, I don't care about making pumpkin bread, and that's okay. I don't have to do that. I really hate Elf on the Shelf. I will die before you see Elf on the Shelf in my home. I will not have that elf in police state. Also, I'm Jewish. Like, this is not for me. My husband's not Jewish, so the kids have Christmas, but I'm just like, anytime my kids ask about it, I'm like, no, never. But that's okay. If I have so many friends who it's really fun, and they have fun with it, and their kids have fun with it. So I'm not hating on Elf on the Shelf if it's your thing and you find joy in it, but it's just like, you can feel the feeling of like guilt when your kids are like, why didn't you make me a homemade Halloween costume, which is something my older daughter has complained about. And I'm just like, you trust me that you don't want that. And then I'm like, but that doesn't even matter to me, and it won't matter to you in, 30 seconds. So I think it's like being able to like pause in the feeling and say like, is this even my values? Is this coming from someone who cares about me and my family and knows my situation, or is it something I saw on Instagram, or is it someone else's garbage values that I don't care about? So like, if the book does anything, like, that is what I want for people to be like, to pause in it and be like, do I even really care? Maybe not.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think so much of this performative, what do you consider like this performative parenting, the pumpkin bread? I mean, the pumpkin bread lady is very nice. I don't want to give the impression that's like that's it. But this sort of performative parenting, I think, is has this valence because it makes like everything that we do about like because I'm doing this because like this is important for my kid and because like that's how we bring joy, you know. And so it almost then takes the joy, like takes away your ability to be like, I do Elf on the Shelf because it's fun. Like maybe Elf on the Shelf is like, I think some people do enjoy Elf on the Shelf. Yeah. And you could say like, yeah, I do Elf on the Shelf not because that's like an important thing about being a parent, but just because like I enjoy the elf police state. And this is something that I thought of quite a lot recently because I did something in my newsletter about lunches, and I was like sort of, it's like it was about like a lunch bento box, like a whole book about like bento box lunches. And I was like, I'm quite skeptical. Came in quite skeptical because I think of bento box lunches as like just an opportunity to be like, did you know that I could make a rice bunny, you know? And this book does have a lot of things of that nature, but actually, like in the conversation, it became clear that the idea was sort of just like, actually, this could be fun. This could be like a sort of fun, and we ended up doing it. And actually, like, it actually is much more fun. And even though like I don't think of it as a performative thing, it was very freeing to be able to be like, yeah, this isn't something I need to do to like be a good parent. It's just like maybe it would be fun to like cut vegetables into like fruit shapes.
Yeah.
With the little cutters, and that's like, and put sticks in them.
Yeah. I mean,
try it.
I think there's also just something to be said for like just more just being. Trying to just let your kids be. I mean, I actually like one thing I feel guilt about is not like that sort of stuff, which like it's just never. I really like cooking with my kids, but like that sort of thing has never been my thing. For me, it's more like yesterday was a great example. It was miserable out. It was that dreaded wintry mix. You guys got actual snow. We got sleet, and it was disgusting. And we crafted, we cooked. My children watched conservatively 47 hours of The Simpsons. And I was like, I felt not great about it. And then I'm just like, but why? They're just vibing. They're so happy. Like, it's gross out. Like, what was I think you do a very good job of framing this. It's like, what was the alternative?
Yeah.
And what are the risks of this situation? Yeah. 0 risks. The alternative was us going out in miserable weather. Ugh, no. Nobody wanted to do that. Like, we were home and cozy, and it was very nice. And so, like, I'm trying to feel better about myself for just letting us be sometimes and not, yeah.
So do you think social media is like a big piece of this?
Okay, so I mean, I've thought a lot about it, and I actually think that the biggest problem is we are seeing all of these images with no context, and we don't know those people, and we don't know their lives, and so our brains naturally just fill in additional details that we don't know. So back to the Halloween costume example. My daughter's best friend from preschool, her mom is so good at crafts. She's amazing. She helped my daughter learn how to use a sewing machine. And I like love that about her. And if I saw her crafts, if she just had an Instagram showing all of her beautiful crafts, it would piss me off so much. And so I think it is that. It's like, it's not that there's something wrong with the technology. I think our brains are not equipped to deal with all of these context-free images beamed into our faces. And so I just try to think about that all of the time. And I've actually had a few very like lovely interactions with people on social media who have been very critical of things that I've written and come from a very different point of view. But when we have an actual conversation, I mean, some people are just, can I curse? Yeah. I don't know here if I can.
I don't know. It's okay.
Some people are just assholes, and that's fine. That's life. Like on and off social media. But like, I think it's that like lack of context. I don't know that it necessarily makes it harder, but I feel like our brains can't accurately assess that amount of media just
You don't
beamed
see
into our
like what
faces.
happens behind the reel where they're making like
Right.
the sourdough glazed donuts.
Right.
That like all the times that like that the flour fell on the floor or
Right.
whatever.
And our brains
You
just
watched that
fill
one
in the
this morning.
information.
I
and-
watched that one this morning.
Right. Although there was one thing that I saw over the pandemic that really broke me, which was like our kids were just all over the place and it was so hard and we were alone, and I saw someone making crackers from scratch and I was just like, honestly, how dare you?
Isn't that just like flour and water and you like roll it out and cut?
It was like you can buy crackers at the store. Like that is the easiest thing to buy at the store. Why are you making them from scratch? Like I just couldn't. It just broke me in such a way. And I have no idea what was going on for that person away from the crackers.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
You don't know. It could be anything. Okay, so I want to end with what I think is a somewhat serious question, which is we've been talking a lot about these questions of choice, but choice is not something everyone has. And we sort of think about the kind of lot of the issues that you talk about in your book are much more salient for people with fewer resources, disproportionately affecting communities of color. So I'd love you to sort of talk a little bit about that and how we think about policy interactions with that.
Well, so, I mean, one statistic that I think about a lot is like the greatest indicator of living in poverty as an older person is that you were a mother. Like having children is expensive. It is extremely expensive. And it is so expensive that we have created a system in which many people cannot afford to work, but they also cannot afford to stay home with their children, full stop. And they might prefer to stay home with their children, but we have created a system where it is too expensive to do so. And that is such a trap. And it makes life so desperately hard for people. And so, again, it's honestly, and it seems like it's not a parenting focused thing, but I think the biggest problem is that our healthcare is tied to our work. And that to get healthcare, you need to work a certain number of hours. And so it removes a lot of flexibility that I think could be possible and still allow people to have an income and work fewer hours and be able to care for their kids. Because I think a lot of times when we talk about solutions, it's like, well, we just need more childcare. And it's like, well, if you look at the polling and you ask people who are parents what their preferred work situation is, most of them say working part-time, which probably isn't possible for everybody, but I think we are so locked into this idea of full-time work that it just, again, it makes it really impossible to sustain ourselves and to have sort of a life where you're just not pulled in a million directions and having to work so many hours, especially at a low-wage job just to make ends meet. So I think like that is a policy fix we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
But honestly,
Really
like
important one.
if we could do that, I would put that way above paid leave because it would just solve a lot of problems for people.
That is a great point. All right, really last question. What makes you hopeful about American motherhood?
Actually, a lot of things. This is a cheesy answer, but my own children, they just like the earnestness, especially my older daughter. My little one is 6, so she just primarily wants to be cozy. That's her only goal in life, which honestly I admire. She does not ever. She just wants to be under blankets all the time.
It's like that Danish like hygiene. What is that word?
Oh my God, she would be so at home there. My older daughter is already, every time she sees an injustice in the world, she just wants to fix it. And I've written about this before, but I remember when she was like 7, she saw the cover of a National Geographic and it was about how the world's population of bees was dying. And she was like, we need to save the bees. Like it was very urgent. And so I just want her to hold on to that and maybe she will save all the bees. So that is my cheesy answer. But I mean, I interview activists all the time and politicians all the time who are working towards the future that I think I would like to see. And they are having wins. They are not on the cover of the New York Times because they are local. But, you know, as I was writing the book, 2 more states passed paid leave laws. I think it was Delaware and Maryland. You know, as I've been talking about the book, there was an article in the Washington Post about how New Mexico passed a childcare action plan where it would give more state funds to childcare workers to pay them more of a living wage. And so it's like and that took 10 years. I've had previously talked to some of the activists who worked on it. That took them 10 years to convince the legislators.
But they did it.
And they did it. And it's like, this is perverse because obviously I am very just distraught that Roe fell. But when you think about it, that was a 50-year conservative plan. They had their eyes on the prize. Like, we could do that too. We just don't do it. And so it was more like, that is a negative change to me, and I'm horrified by it. But the idea that things are set in amber and they will never change is just clearly false. They can change. We just have to work to make them change and build these coalitions. And it is hard. It is extremely hard and long work. But there's millions of people who are doing that work. And so that always gives me hope.
Thank you. All right, this was awesome. I think Amy is going to talk us out.
What is Elf on the Shelf?
Oh my gosh. So you like move an elf around your house at night. And it's like telling your kids, like, but only if your kids were good,
watching.
And the elf is
It's like
watching
a new
them.
thing. So this is a new thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
That's
an
why
old mother.
You didn't miss anything.
But the elf is, the primary thing is like the elf is watching you. So if you're not good, the elf will not reward you.
Okay. All right. There's a purpose. A round of applause. This was so wonderful. Jess will be signing books, and on Wednesday, it's our last event in CitySpace, Understanding Lifespan and Why Aging Might Be Reversible. If you want to live a long life after you've raised your kids, I encourage you all to come on Wednesday. Meghna Chakrabarty will be interviewing David Sinclair. Thank you so much.